Okay, we are back again. So this is the HOOA podcast. I forgot the number. I think it's number 7. I got my bro Eddie, War of Weakness here. Happy to
What's
have you,
up,
man.
everybody?
I think if I give him the credit, it was his idea to do this. So I'm gonna give him the honor to explain what we're gonna do today on the HOOA podcast.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to read this book. I think for about 4 years now,
Yeah.
maybe even 5.
Mhm.
And this was way before you and I connected on Twitter.
Mhm.
And as soon as you and I connected, I knew that that we were both into stories,
Mhm.
that we're both students and teachers through stories.
Yeah.
And we were both just a couple guys on the path, right?
Yeah.
And somehow along the way, we started talking about this character Musashi
Mhm.
and the and the novel that's based on his life.
Yeah.
And I told you that that I've been wanting to read this book for so long, but
Yeah.
I've just been putting it off because there was a part of me that was sort of intimidated, not just by the length, but also by the journey that it was going to
Yeah.
take me on.
Mhm.
And you had told me you read it.
Yeah.
And so, a little bit of context, there was a podcast that Jocko Willink did with Tim Ferriss,
Yeah.
where they broke down the Musashi novel.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that was my number one incentive to read it, so I could
Yeah.
listen to that podcast.
Yeah. For me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I heard that you had read it, I thought, well, maybe I should put some pressure on myself. And so I suggested to you, I will read this book.
Yeah.
And when I finish this book, you and I will sit down and do a podcast about it. And so
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, so that's it, man. Yeah, I listened to the same podcast of Jocko Willink. It's Jocko Podcast 100. Maybe I'll link it in the bio of this video.
Mhm.
But so I listened to Jocko Podcast a lot before he came up with this, and he always delays certain books that he wants to do. Like for example, Blood Meridian. He's probably at podcast 50 million right now, and he probably hasn't done that one. But so Musashi was one of it as well, and he put it
Yeah.
as a goal to people to read Musashi because it's so thick. I have it with me. I can show you. Look, it's wait, I have to show the thickness. It's fucking thick. If I throw this at
It's a
somebody
weapon.
in the neck, I can kill somebody. But so he designed it to be there for podcast 100, coupled with Tim Ferriss. It was supposed to be an epic podcast. He really smooshed me up for that last page. I'm not gonna spoil it right yet for people who haven't read it completely, because we're gonna go through it chronologically. But he said it was the best final page he ever read, Jocko. But then me and Eddie saw the podcast, and we're thinking what did you say to me, Eddie? Can you explain in your words?
Yeah. So the podcast is, I think it's nearly 4 hours long. And it's cool. It is a good podcast.
Yes, for sure.
And to be fair, the book is so dense, you cannot cover it in one podcast. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Unless you're speaking for 24 hours.
Yeah.
With drugs and alcohol involved. Cause it's a very, very deep book.
Yeah.
And when I read it, automatically there's 4 or 5 things that go through your head as you're reading the book.
Yeah.
The messages that you learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And for a 4-hour podcast, I thought it didn't go deep enough.
Mm-hmm.
There was at least 2 other issues that I felt were extremely important that were not covered.
Yeah. So.
But what's cool about the podcast is because Tim Ferriss he spent a few years living in Japan, so he's quite knowledgeable on traditional Japanese culture.
Yes.
And so there's parts of the podcast where they go down the rabbit hole explaining, Japanese history and Japanese culture.
Yes.
Based off references in the book.
Yeah.
So it's cool in that respect. But I think just based on the book itself, I thought it lacked a few things.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can cover that.
Yeah. Hopefully we can cover that. Of course, Eddie always has really cool insights. I've talked with him a couple of times, and he always find some way to extract out of me or a topic in general some kind of gold nuggets, coupled with his keen insight to provide value. So it's gonna be dope. And for me, so it was almost like a trip down memory lane. I had read this book in 2017, and it was in my more formative years. Even though it was only 3 years ago, I brought this book with me to my first, or one of my first solo travels in Europe. And some of you might think that I'm a traveler, but I'm actually like only in this, like, give or take 3 to 5 years, not that long actually. But I brought this fucking book with me, and it's almost symbolic, because Musashi goes on this path himself, this journey. And as I was going through my own self-development journey, I was reading this book, and I took a lot of notes. So some of them we're gonna like discuss a little bit here, not too much detail. It's not that important, but just opening up the book again brought me back to my old self, and it's really nostalgic as to back then I wanted to self-perfect basically, and I have still the same desire. I highlighted a word that said self-perfection, and like Eddie said in a recent thread of him, what did you say? What the book is really about for people who haven't read it? Actually, if you drill it down to one word or something, I said in the thread that you wrote.
Yeah, it's about self-mastery. That's really the message of the book. And what's funny is the reason why I wanted to read it is because, just being like a nerdy Asian kid growing up, I've always been drawn to like adventure stories and martial arts and swordplay. And so when I read it, I didn't have much expectations other than that, other than the fact that I knew it was an epic novel. And I thought it was going to be like a really cool, like, samurai story and lots of violence and stuff like that. And there is an aspect to that.
Yes.
The real message of the novel is that if you want to reach self-mastery, you better be prepared for a long and painful but beautiful journey.
Yes.
And that's really what the book is about. Regardless of what your calling is, whether your calling is to be the world's best graphic designer or the world's best swordsman, which is what Musashi wanted to be, the path is the same.
Yes.
And so, that's the main message I got from the book. What about you?
Yeah, I think for you equated it to, I think, if I quote it well, from Robert Greene's Mastery, the book,
Yes.
So it's about mastery, self-mastery. And I think when I was younger, I didn't grasp it fully, if I think about it. And because there's a lot of self-control, because self-mastery equates to self-control of, like, let's say, the body, mind, and spirit. And these days I'm more occupied with those things because my, meditation sessions are longer, more intentful, and they reap more benefits because I am more controlling my mind than when I was a younger kid, And so I definitely felt that it was not about battle, because he talks a lot about everything that is beside the sword. The sword is like a key or like an axe to the way that he talks about. And like the famous Musashi quote, if you know the way, you see the way in all things. It's almost like a holistic approach to life, this grand philosophy to understand if you do one thing, if you can perfect that, let's say swordsmanship, or like Eddie said, web design, then you can see the principles and the second order effects that derive from them, and then you can perfect your life in general. So for me, it's definitely about perfection, and but also like a zen point of a zen style of life, peace, inner peace. You have to what's that other quote, sic vis pacem parabellum, if you want peace you have to prepare for war. It's one of those Latin quotes. And this book is about really Musashi dueling to the ends and getting inner peace, because that's the journey that we're seeing. He begins as a young kid, Can you tell us a little bit about that, Eddie? How the book starts a little bit off?
Yeah. So the book is broken down into, is it 7 books? 6 or
Yeah,
7
wait, I have
books?
the book
7.
with me. I think it's 7 books. So you have like so a little bit background for me. I've read Book of Five Rings for the fans out there, and that Book of Five Rings is also spread in the Book of Earth. That's one. Book of Water, Fire, Book of Wind, and then Book of Sky would be in the Book of Five Rings would be Void, I think already. But in Musashi, this book, you have the Book of Sun and Moon and the Perfect Light. So you have 7 books. Is this book?
There you go. So the book begins. He's basically like this, just a young. I mean, he's just like a young man, like anyone else. He's hungry. He's got a fire in his belly. He's got this. It's almost like a chip on his shoulder, like he wants to prove himself.
Yes.
But he doesn't have any self-control yet. He just has this energy that he wants to get out.
Yeah.
And the way the novel begins is pretty epic. I don't know, maybe we should even read it. He's literally at the. It starts at the beginning, at the end of a battle, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he's laying in the fields with all these dead bodies with his best friend, who we have to talk about at some point.
Yeah, Matahachi, right? He's really important. Mm-hmm. Yes, you wanted to stress that because that didn't come up in the Jocko podcast well enough. But Eddie will zoom into that. I caught it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of give a brief overview. So basically, he begins in this battle with this guy Matahachi, and they sort of go off on 2 different paths. Like they start off at the same place, and they go off on 2 separate paths. And I thought one of the main messages of this book is the contrast between Musashi's journey and Matahachi's journey.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like one of the biggest lessons from this book. Like Matahachi basically exists so you can appreciate Musashi.
Yes.
And they don't even talk about that at all. But anyway, we're not here to criticize other podcasts. We're just here to talk about Musashi. Yeah. So in modern day terminology, Matahachi in 2020 would be what we call a simp.
Yes. And also an NPC. An NPC.
Yeah.
Coupled with a normie. Like if we have to shit on Matahachi, we're gonna go all the way. Yeah.
Yeah. He's basically a coward. I mean, he's a good guy. You know, he got good intentions, but he's basically a coward.
Yes.
Whereas Musashi is like the hero, right?
Yes.
But he's not perfect either. And that's what let's just get started first. That's what book 1 is really about. Book 1 is really about the first step in Musashi's journey in going from a boy to a man.
Yes, and in fact, Musashi here even has another name, and it's Shinmen Takezo, and he is not called Miyamoto Musashi yet even. So he even has to create this Ronin, this masterless samurai, this legend that we all know from all these things that we've read about him. And he's just this boy with a different name even. So, yeah.
So a couple of disclaimers. Obviously, if you haven't read the book yet, and you don't want any spoilers, pause this podcast, download it, save it, and come back and listen to it.
Yes.
And the other thing is, apologies in advance to all my Japanese brothers and sisters. I'm just gonna fuck up the pronunciation. Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool. So he starts off. I'm just reading the summary here. Fury. Takezo and Matahachi, 2 foot soldiers who fought on the losing side at the Battle of Sekigahara, find refuge and a place to heal their wounds in the house of the mysterious Akemi and her lascivious mother Oko. So Matahachi ends up staying with these 2 women, right?
Oh yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So Matahachi, some background. So here's the first sign that Matahachi's not, is a flawed character.
Okay.
He's promised to this woman called Otsu.
Ah, yes.
Yes, right? So he's supposed to like marry her. This is like old school Japan, people. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's a very traditional culture. If you promise yourself to marry a woman like that, you have to do the honorable thing and fulfill that promise. Okay, it's not like today where you go on a Tinder date, it doesn't work out, you get another one. It doesn't work like that. This guy's compromised, right? And so after this battle, instead of going back to Otsu, he ends up staying with these two women.
Yes.
While Musashi goes back to the village where they're from, which is in the province of Miyamasaka.
Yes.
So it says here, Takeso receives from Oko, who is the older woman, a wooden sword which he uses to kill Sujikaze Tema, the leader of a local gang of freebooters.
So I just want to tie in quickly, for the fans of the Book of Five Rings, which I have with me as well. We're not plugging anything, no affiliate fucking links, but for the fans out there, Musashi wrote 2 books, Book of Five Rings and Dokodo. And this, and I own both of them, but this is like his masterpiece, the Book of Five Rings. And if you open it, he actually mentions the first person he kills is around his teenage years. And I think in the book of Eiji Yoshikawa, Musashi, this is the person that he means. Just like some cool historical thing, you know.
Fior, you've read all 3 of those books, right?
Yeah.
So is there a particular order you would recommend people read these books in? Or
so I'm going to drop, like, to make it less confusing, I'm going to just put it in the link, like Musashi starter pack, I would call it, or something like that. Yeah, but we're just discussing now Musashi, the romanticized biography. There's also a more legit biography by William Wilson, The Lone Samurai. But I would say the Book of Five Rings is Musashi's main body of work. It's really independently, you can read it independently, you know? And the Dokodo is just a thing you can actually Google, and it's for free on the web. I've put it in one of my smaller info guides as well, because it's just 21 principles to life. For the fans out there who know me, you must have read it already. But what's funny about it, it's more cool. I think it's cooler if you've finished the whole book, Musashi, because he finished it actually when he was fucking 60 years old or something. The Dokodo, it's his final masterpiece, that he came up with these Zen aphorisms that are impossible to master all of them. I kid you not, if you are listening to this now and you're thinking, this is fucking easy, I'm gonna master all these 21 rules, then you're lying, because it's almost like a puzzle. You can't master them. Like, one of them is like, accept everything as it is. I know you're gonna fuck up that one already. That's number 1, you know? people, me as well, like, I like worry about money, or, you're gonna like not accept things. It's very human behavior. So, but he wrote it at the end of his journey after this is like a full spoiler podcast. So after he kills his final nemesis in the last page of the book, and it's more satiating to read Musashi first and then the Dokodo. It's really interesting to see why would a man write these almost like sparse, emotionless Zen aphorisms while he has gone through such a fucking length to become actually a more like a champion, almost. So it's really interesting to see that. Yeah.
Is there any indication based on those 3 books as to how he wrote that book, or was it just like he lived this entire life and then he wanted to sit down and codify a way of living?
So yeah, I'm a little bit like rusty on those details on Musashi, so don't quote me on this. But Book of Five Rings he wrote to teach other people. Yes.
Okay.
Almost like a school. So it's, I think, in my opinion, after the book Musashi, so after he killed his final rival, it's like this dude who's like a fucking UFC champion. And you're thinking like, I got the belt, I have nothing to do left in my life. What am I gonna do? Become a teacher. So he had a school of Nito Ryu. So if you read the book Musashi, at one point, I think it's like in book Fire or Wind, book 3 or 4, he comes up with this idea to fight with 2 swords. And it's really prominent in the Book of Five Rings as well. And so this Nitoryu style, which means heaven and earth, so a combination of everything, basically fighting with two swords. He wanted to teach this to people. And that is the Book of Five Rings about, that he was teaching people. And the Dokoro is, I think it was even maybe like a gift to his final student or his best student or his last student. Like, bro, I'm dying. I'm fucking 60 years old. Here's what I learned in my whole life. That was the indication of the Dokoro then. It was not, it was not for money, all these things. It was just to pass on, you know, to pay it forward, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it.
Interesting.
Yeah, just some side notes from other Musashi books.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to pick up this samurai course by Musashi, it's on Gumroad. It's currently 50% off. Right. So Matahachi, back to the story outline here, Fury. Matahachi, so he fucks off with these two chicks, Oko and Akemi.
Yeah.
Akemi. Oko is her mother.
Yes.
And Musashi returns back to his home village. It says here, so back in Miyamoto, Musashi's home village, Otsu, she's a very important character. We have to remember that name, Otsu.
Yes.
Who is Matahachi's fiance, like I brought up before. And Taquan. Taquan's a priest. He's like the spiritual influence in Musashi's life.
Yes. One of my favorite characters.
Yep. And so they take part in some sort of festival, and that's when Otsu spots among the other worshippers Takezo, who is Musashi.
Yes.
And she basically falls in love with him. She's in love with him pretty much the entire novel.
Yeah.
And the next element before you chip in your Fury. Here's, I'm going to introduce another character that's very important. Matahashi has his mother. Yes. Her name is Osugi. Osugi, I don't know how to pronounce that. Osugi. So Osugi's a very traditional Japanese woman. Okay. She believes, for some reason, she just assumes that Musashi murdered her son, Matahashi, when in reality, Matahashi is, voluntarily fled with these two women.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
And basically, she has this grudge, more than a grudge. She has this bitterness and hate towards Musashi.
Yeah.
Because she's just, for some reason, I can't remember exactly how she gets the idea, but she gets the idea that Musashi murdered her son and got away with it.
Yeah. And
this is a really important point to bring up that's applicable to, the modern world. Like a lot of people, the facts don't matter. What matters is what someone believes.
Yes.
So if I choose to believe for some reason that my brother HOOA Fury is a scammer, okay, for some reason, the way I perceive everything, the way he tweets his emails and everything, that's going to become evidence in my mind that he's a scammer.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens to this Osugi lady.
Yes.
Everything that Musashi does.
Yeah.
Like she just thinks, oh, there you go. That's
creepy as fuck.
That's another example of why I think he murdered my son.
Yeah. She is definitely creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. She's creepy, but she's just angry. And really the source of her anger is because I think, the way I perceived it, she can't stand the fact that her son's a coward and Musashi is not.
Yes. It's almost like projecting. If we're going to go into psychology, it's fucking projecting. You have an own loser son, and you see somebody like is a fucking champion, you can't stand it, and you want to murder the champions, and you're a fucking loser. There's a lot of like cope here, like the young kids would say, cope. Yeah.
Yeah. And this leads to I don't remember exactly Fury, but in the first, I remember reading the first two books of this book,
Yeah.
and thinking, "Holy shit, this Musashi guy gets in a lot of drama. Like he
Yeah.
gets in a lot of fights when he's younger."
Yeah. So what the accumulation of my notes of book one, Earth, how do you say, comprises is basically Musashi always getting into a fight. And that's why
Yeah.
I think I said to Eddie that he was taller than average. I don't know if it's true, but he was such a force to be reckoned with. It gets mentioned in book two, Water, as well, that he's such a savage, that his savage spirit has to be tamed. And his savage spirit, I think it's a lesson for the young adolescents listened. So me and Eddie are a little bit older, not per se fully matured. I'm not gonna go there, but we're more, yeah, we've seen more things. So this youthfulness, this almost like braggadocious, like ramparting force of energy that gets unchanneled, unchecked, can get you in trouble. You must know it if you're younger and you go to like crazy parties or shit like that. I've been into trouble as well. I can be transparent about that. But Musashi gets into trouble at one point, which is a pivotal point, I think, in Book Earth, that the monk that we just mentioned, Takuan, at one point he captures Musashi. It's because of Musashi's recklessness and his wildness, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And this is one of the most important
Mhm.
moments, I guess, in his developmental years, right? When he
Yes,
gets captured.
yes,
Um, cool. You've got some great quotes here, man. Do you want to read out a couple of these quotes from your notes?
yeah, for sure. Let me check it out. There, it was mostly as to I think how savage he was. I think if you're mentioning that, like, for example, Musashi, like he begged to the god of war, Hachiman. He just liked to
Mhm.
channel energy from the fucking gods. What was really interesting is that Takezo, so this is the name of Musashi before he was Musashi, he was an orphan. And I quickly knew from like empirical, how do you say, like reasoning, like N is one, of course, that orphans are always, they have to prove themselves or something. And we all know the big orphan story. I equated it to Batman. Batman, he's a fucking orphan. And it's the same. I saw Musashi the same as that in my head because I'm a Batman fan. This is not going to be about Batman, but it's when your parents are not there, you become such a different type of person. And I saw this force of nature, this, what I quoted, a creature of extremes. He was
Mhm.
with primitivity in his blood, even as a small child. It's because when you have no parents, you're unchecked, basically. Something harkening back to the fierce wars of ancient Japan, something as wild as it was pure. And that's so magnificent about Musashi. He has this wild energy, and it's dangerous, it's scary, but it's pure at the same time. And this, he's almost like a diamond in the rough because we all know that he becomes this almost like Zen master later, you know? And
Yeah.
you can
One
also
thing I like
yeah,
about
go on, yeah.
one thing I like about him is obviously he takes a lot of risks, right?
Yes.
Like what like his sister gets imprisoned, and
Mhm.
then he basically just he's like, well, I gotta free her, so he just runs in there and
Yeah,
fucking attacks everybody.
yeah, yeah,
And he's like a kid. He's like 19 or 18 or
yeah.
something like that.
And what? So Eddie's laughing at it a little bit, but what I want to address here for people who know a little bit what I tweet about, but also Zen in general and this Buddhist mindset, you know, we're talking about present state awareness. So coming back to the Tim Ferriss and Jocko podcast 100, there was one word that clicked with me. So when I finished the whole book, I I think I spotted the word afterwards when I was looking at my notes was trance. When Musashi fights, he becomes something else, and it's like he's in a trance. And when what
Mm-hmm.
trance means for you is maybe different what it means for me, of course. But you can equate it maybe to hypnosis or maybe magic or spells or whatever. But you become lucid. You forget all time and space. You're so immersed in the present moment. You have this present state awareness, which special forces soldiers have as well. or athletes or top performers or peak performers, they're totally in flow and they're addressing the skill and task at hand. And even in book one, Musashi had it already as a talent. So you can say he cultivated his skill by discipline and following the way of the sword and reaching his true calling and putting in the time and the work. But he already had this gift from the beginning to go full in fucking savage and go into full, what I wrote here, sheer animal ecstasy. The reason why he is so successful, if you finish the book, he's a dueler with, I think, 60-0 duels. He's undefeated. It's because he's a fucking animal. And we all know, if you watch these nature videos on YouTube or whatever, they don't give a fuck about anything. As soon as they see their fucking prey, they become a monster. You see it in their eyes, you know, those cats, and bam, they attack their animals, you know, like I have here a quote when Musashi killed the first guy that Eddie mentioned. Takezo started nonchalantly back towards the house. An observer new on the scene might have thought him out for an evening stroll with not a care in the world. He felt free, no remorse, knowing that if the other man had won, he himself would be lying there dead and alone. This shows to the Ronin and the samurai mindset, kill or be killed. You cannot know about these things in these times and these day and age because we don't live like that anymore, like fucking animals, you know? And that is something that is very unique to Musashi that I just wanted to share. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He goes to every battle basically with this conviction, right?
Yes.
He's like, conviction. Yeah, conviction that there's only two things that can happen: A, I kill everyone; B, I die.
Yes.
And he's completely cool with that.
Yes.
You know, it's not like today where anyone who takes a risk, they're calculating like 20 to 100 different possibilities.
Yes. Yeah.
And they end up just being stuck in analysis by paralysis.
Yeah.
Paralysis by analysis. What was it? Yeah, sorry. And he never struggles with that. You know, that's one thing that's very, very admirable that we could all learn about Musashi. If you're gonna do something, do it with 110% conviction.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something in general of the Japanese culture, the samurai, but specifically of Musashi, why he's so victorious. He's
Yes.
win or learn, all or nothing, and he just goes for it. And sometimes he makes these moves that is like, yeah, he's like, you can hear his doubt sometimes. He's not without doubt, but he's just merciless in that is all or nothing. He doesn't give a fuck. So it has to do because with that he's with an orphan. So there's an African saying that I know, you're not your own man until your father passes. And it's always, I think I can speak from me then, because your parents, it's not condescending, but they held you back a little bit because they had like expectations of you. They wanted you to be a doctor or whatever. And you're always thinking, what would they think? But Musashi, he's just this, yeah, animal. He's just fucking out there in the fucking world, you know?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to listen to anybody.
Right. So let's go back to the storyline theory.
Sure.
So we were talking about one point I missed. Sorry. Like I said, they kidnapped his sister, but the reason why they kidnapped his sister is because that bitter old woman, Osugi, who is Matahachi's mom, somehow convinces the town, the local samurai to take her in.
Yeah.
In order to lure in Musashi. And Musashi, what does he do? He's an honorable man. He basically breaks into the prison and he storms the prison by himself.
Yeah.
And tries to free her.
Yeah. That's his big mistake.
Yes. And then basically, I can't remember if he was successfully. I don't think that he was successful.
No.
But he basically becomes like a target of the entire town.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
And then he voluntarily gets imprisoned. Well, he basically hands himself over to this spiritual leader, this monk, Takuan.
Yeah, so I want to zoom in a little bit on this. So if you have to create a dichotomy between brute force channeled into the archetype Musashi and more cunning and intellect in the monk Takuan. So Takuan is just, if I would equate it, maybe a more scrawny guy. He can't fight for shit. He doesn't have a sword. If you would have called Musashi out with a sword, I'm gonna beat the living shit out of you, Musashi would have just straight up killed him and just fled. But what happened was Musashi in this scene was hiding or something like that, and he didn't want to come out. And I think Otsu was involved as well, the girl who was betrothed to Matahachi but is more in love with Musashi. And I think she was in play as well, I remember. I don't know if Takuan used her as bait, but anyway, the matter is, Takuan is, so I was reading Greek mythology, so I'm going to bring this in. Takuan is like Odysseus of the Greek mythology from the Odyssey, who uses his wits and words to trap people, to lure people out, you know? And Musashi, or then maybe like Achilles or something like that, or Agamemnon, if you know these characters. It's more like this soldier that is, you can't beat him, you know? So Takuan tricked him with a trap, and he defeats him to come out, and then he traps him, and then it revolves, it goes to that they string him up a tree. This is really like a fascinating scene. Everybody, a lot of people will know this scene, so yeah.
So they tie him up to this tree. And I can't remember how long he's there. He's there for a few days, right? Or maybe even a few weeks.
Yeah. He's fasting. He's on that fast. Yeah. No, this is why I always... No, yo, bro. I want to just, like, jump in here. This is why I think people are such fucking pussies. Because when I was younger, I was reading about my heroes, such as Musashi. And for me, even though, let's say... Okay, I know Musashi was real, you know? But when I read about stories, those are my heroes that, like, they're suffering, like, these trials and tribulations. And their example gets instilled inside me. And I'm thinking, yo, you guys can definitely suffer one breakfast. But then I always hear these fucking normies crying if they hear, like, this small, like, you know, the sound your stomach makes. And then they say, I'm hungry. And I'm like, no, you're not. The sound your stomach just made was your stomach cleaning yourself, that you actually didn't stuff it with fucking garbage for 5 seconds, you know? And it's just like people have more, how do you say, survival instinct in them. And it's just prevalent in Musashi, for example, as archetype, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely a key lesson you can learn from this book is one of endurance, right? Like the human being, the man, you can endure quite a lot.
Yeah.
The problem is, you know, the quality of life that we have now is just so, I mean, at least in the West, right? We're talking exclusively, you know, in the West. The quality of life is so good now that anything less than a little bit of comfort is considered like torture to people, right?
Yes.
And fasting is just such a little example. Like, we're so conditioned to having breakfast because it seems so normalized that you people can't even go for, you know, a couple of hours without eating.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. Like, I've been doing fasting for years now, and honestly, it's a non-issue. A lot of that hunger that you feel is just psychological.
Yeah.
But I'm not just talking about hunger. I'm talking about a lot of things. It's like the phone, right?
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a late bloomer. I didn't get a smartphone until like 2014 or something like that.
Yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
And so I've never. I mean, I'm just not addicted to my phone. I mean, I guess compared to like 20 years ago, I would be considered addicted. But you know, I know people who they literally can't, like, they get really edgy for like just even 1 hour without looking at their phone.
This is what we call weakness. Yes.
Yeah, like, we're so conditioned to comfort and modern day luxuries that, you know, we can't even stand. We can't even endure. Well, I wouldn't even call it endurance, because An hour without your phone or without a snack, it's not even endurance, man.
What are we talking
I don't
about,
know,
man?
it's
Yeah.
just weak.
Yeah.
You know, there's parts in this book where he hasn't eaten for days, and like the only thing he eats is like 2 rice bowls.
Yeah. And he still managed to butcher 5 to 10 guys with ease.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I can't even remember. I can't even remember the best meal he has, because
Yeah.
the food that he gets is
It's very
he's
sparse.
basically living. He's living on a shoestring the entire book, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely interesting.
Like,
So me and Eddie were talking about what's the physicality of Musashi, and I'm definitely like picturing him as something wiry, very lean, very living on the fat of the land, because he's just taking what he can take. He doesn't give a fuck about food, I think, or something like that, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
So
all right,
yeah, so I definitely wanted. I was browsing to my like notes. I wanted to zoom in on the fact. Yeah, for me, this is what I missed more in like in the Jocko podcast. I remember I wanted to talk about this. So years after I finished the book, a quote stuck with me, even though I forgot the whole context. But Takuan traps Musashi, so he strings him up the cryptomeria tree. It's a specific type of tree, and so Musashi and him have like have a dialogue, and Musashi's hanging there, and he almost lectures Musashi that, yo, bro, what you've been doing, you motherfucker, you fucked up, and you have been being a fucking savage while you had so much fucking potential. And there's this quote that was really fascinating. It's typical of a monk who would speak in spiritual terms. So he says to Musashi, you couldn't break a single branch of this tree, the tree Musashi's hanging from, much less make a dent in the universe. And that always struck me, because how do you dent the universe? And it's something, for example, that The Rock has tattooed on his shoulder. I know this. He has this quote that says, dent the universe. And sometimes I see some people like on Instagram or, you know, like very motivational people talk about this. But how do you actually dent the universe, you know? And then Takwon goes on and says, yeah, you could have worked for the good of the country. Try to do something for others. Taketsu, if you just tried, you'd have a chance of moving the gods or even the universe, not to mention plain everyday people. And that just resonated with me, man.
Powerful stuff. And while we're on that point in the story, I've got one quote that I've just highlighted here. I'd like to zoom in on. Very, very important. Going back to what I was talking about a few moments ago about how we're so accustomed to the comforts that we have, the creature comforts, let's just say, of modern day living, that it's very easy to fall in the trap of like feeling sorry for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Musashi, you know, he's caught, right? He's tied to this tree. He's got no food. He's got no friends. You know, there's no one there to save him. And his answer, right, is to basically he doesn't say the word gratitude, but he's basically deferring to the power of gratitude. So he says here, quote, I'm alive, he thought over and over, vowing that from that moment on, he'd live a very different sort of life.
Yeah.
That is a man learning his lesson. Right? So rather than saying, oh, fuck, it's over, I'm going to die, he looks at the positive. So this is a guy, right? He's got nothing. Yeah. He's literally tied to a fucking tree with 0 possessions.
Yeah.
And the thing that he can think about is, I'm alive. I'm grateful. I mean, he doesn't say the word grateful, but he's definitely coming from a place of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
He's basically saying, hey, it's not over. It's good. I'm breathing. I've got consciousness. I'm good. Yeah. You know, and if I ever break free, I vow to live differently.
Yeah. And this is,
you know,
like,
and that's a rare thing, because so many people these days, they fuck up and they just don't have any remorse. You know?
Yeah, but
And that's
do you think, is that true? Don't people feel that? Is it because you said a lot of people don't have remorse? What do you mean by that?
like a lot of people fall into the trap of just making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Because I don't know, man. Maybe this is my bitter old man feeling right now, but that's because like we don't,
Mhm.
until you like modern society is soft, right? Like we don't, what you don't really get, people don't often get the sort of punishment that they should get and
Yes,
learn
it's
from
it's
those lessons.
it's not for keeps. It's not close enough. So to bring mortality a little bit closer, what people don't know, so Musashi was strung up the tree. Actually, it's almost like being sentenced to death. He was not hanged, but
Yeah,
the scene that follows from this is that this motherfucker is going to jail, you know?
yeah,
And it's, I'm not threatening anybody, but I think most people fuck ups are not close to incarceration, hospital, or the funeral. Those are the only
that's
three
what I
things.
mean.
Yeah, that's the only three things that matters in life, I think, as like a bottom line, like a baseline. If you've ever touched one of those or dipped in it, then you know that you're playing this game, what we call life, for keeps. You know, if you've
Yeah,
known somebody so close to you that got an ill, then you just taste death. You know, or
yeah,
like that. Or if you've, like, some people, you might have been gone to jail, or like you've been incarcerated, you were stuck, you fucked up, and you were like, shit, man, I can't even go to the fucking supermarket. Something so basic. And this is very topical in these times of day. If you're listening to it, it's during the COVID lockdown shit. You must feel it, that some things in life are very sanctimonious. You know, it has a sanctity to it. You know.
yeah. I mean, you see this a lot with online behavior. The reason why there's so many trolls and so many idiots online is because there's no real consequences to behaving that
Yes.
way.
Yes. Yes.
That's the difference. So
Yeah. Very
Musashi's
powerful.
storming a fucking jail to save his sister.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. That's like the modern equivalent of that would be some idiot saying something super offensive online, as weak as that comparison is.
Yeah. That's
But the
interesting.
point is, there's no
Yeah.
consequences. People,
So
and
okay. Yeah.
and if there's no consequences to negative behavior, you're never gonna improve, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, we can talk about self-awareness and like criticizing yourself and so forth, but the reality is that's a really rare trait. Most people do not possess the level of self-awareness necessary to fix their own mistakes
Yeah.
until it's too late.
Yes.
um that might be pessimistic of me, but that's just how that's what I'm feeling.
I definitely want to chime in
that's
there,
I'm,
Eddie.
that's what I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this may sound narcissistic from me, but I, so in this, in our realm, I'm not talking about the book, but in our realm, I see so many ballers. I see so many smart young kids. I see successful people. I see
Yeah,
beautiful people, handsome people, because we're in a certain, like, let's say, like, content creator, like these go-getters, let's call it that. Me and Eddie know a couple of these guys. But what I like to bring to the table for me is that I say that I am one of the most self-aware person on the fucking planet. I dare to bet a lot of myself on that stake, because I go inside myself so many times during the day, and that when I fuck up, I recognize all these little things. You know, I'm not saying I'm Musashi. I don't give a fuck about those analogies, but I'm just saying I know myself, and this is really important when you fuck up. And when Musashi fucks up, it's for keeps. And in this, and in these pivotal moments when you fuck up, from the lessons you extract, you can grow into this amazing thing. Because the fact that Musashi goes to jail is also, maybe at the same time, his down point, but at the same time the catalyst for Shimen Taketsu, a random savage boy, to transform in the legend Miyamoto Musashi. So every lesson definitely has, every mistake definitely has its fruits to bear, you know?
yes. So after basically the chick Otsu,
Yes.
Matahashi's fiance, the one who's in love with Musashi, she freed Musashi, right? She lets him go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she freed him from the tree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then this is where he becomes Musashi, and I see you've got a lot of notes here. So, if you, maybe you want to talk us through that, bro.
Yeah. Wait. So, what was really interesting is that Musashi stopped being an animal. Yeah. So before he was the savage boy, and I think is this dichotomy of being first a savage, an animal, and to turning into more, how do you say this, like a knight. Yeah, because samurais always equated with nobility, and he saw himself more somebody who had outgrown his adolescent recklessness, and I quote this. He became more a courageous man, signaling the virtues that are prevalent in Japanese culture that we know of, and the life that had been given to him was something to be treasured and cherished, polished and perfected. And this is definitely zooming in or embellishing the metaphor that we are using, that Musashi was this diamond in rough, to polish and to perfect. And yeah, life is like a jewel. It gets mentioned a lot. I think I quoted on later as well, that life is this jewel to be treasured. And I think we miss that, and we squander it. We fuck up and then we just there's no consequence. And definitely everything Musashi does, I think, it's also his skill to put himself in the arena, as Theodore Roosevelt would say, the man in the arena quote. Musashi propels himself in the situation where it is for keeps. If he fucks up, he gets a sword to his head, then he dies. And it's definitely there that he makes his mark, because he always keeps winning by accident, I think, by accident, but you know. And yeah, okay, yeah. What do you?
Yeah, that's a really good. So just to sort of like bring a more relevant point to the modern context.
Yeah.
So basically, the book one's about Musashi. He's a young man. He's got a lot to prove. He wants to be a swordsman. He's picking fights with people. He's fucking going into duels. He's out of control, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really common thing with a lot of young men.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, a lot of young guys, especially like guys who are like in their 20s, you don't have any idea how much. I'm 35. Like, I understand, like, the energy you have when you're in your 20s is completely different. And I'm still young, I'm still healthy and everything, but when you're in your 20s, especially like your early to mid 20s, you have this kept up energy inside of you, and you can channel that energy towards whatever the fuck you want. Most guys, unfortunately, channel that energy towards drinking and chasing girls
and partying, and not even doing
partying.
Yeah,
and I think that's fine if you
smoking
control
weed,
it, but,
video games, masturbation, pornography.
Exactly, but that energy could be used for, in Musashi's case, he used energy to by dueling with people, right?
Yeah.
And when he becomes Musashi, when he goes from Takezo to Musashi, he learns how to channel that energy towards his calling, which is basically to study the art of war and to become the ultimate swordsman.
Yeah, for sure.
The ultimate samurai.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So he gets, so in my notes, I have this small moment that he gets trapped in jail. And this is like almost like a tragedy, in the sense that Musashi, when he gets captured, he goes to jail when he's 18 and he stays in jail. Almost, it feels not like a real jail because it's with this lord, and he is closed in this secret room where he does get to study up on books. Zen books, Bushido, Art of War of Sun Tzu. He actually reads that, so that's a cool cameo for the Sun Tzu Art of War lovers. And he just stays in there for 3 years just reading. And it's not, how do you say this? It's sad in one point because he wasted his life. But for me, what I wrote down in 2017 still resonates with me to this day. And I quote, so Musashi became immersed in the sacred scriptures and read thousands of volumes, Japanese and Chinese history, Zen volumes. The room, the cell actually, but he called it just a room, he was just chilling there, is like a mother's womb. it's up to you whether it's a chamber of darkness or light. I definitely want to chime in here because a lot of us listening to it right now can equate that with this lockdown situation. I see so many people. How do I say this? Like, even if they're locked up just a few days, thinking that, how do I say this? There's such a darkness to their situation. While, like, bro, you're not even in jail. It's not a year. Suck it up. Be a man. Make something, make something worthy and like full of light out of your situation. And it's definitely like in each situation you can make something out of it. That's definitely something Musashi did for those 3 years, because these 3 years were the catalyst for every badass motherfucker scene that Musashi is known for, actually. So just want to put it out there.
And this brings out a fundamental lesson, really.
Okay.
Probably the most important lesson for me from this book.
Yeah.
If you want to reach mastery, regardless of your craft, whether you want to be, a multi-millionaire entrepreneur,
yeah,
or you want to be a novelist,
mm-hmm,
or you want to be you want to be a fantastic, you want to be a great parent, or whatever it is, right? Whatever your calling is. Everyone knows that it takes a lot of time, but what a lot of people don't talk about is the opportunity cost that comes with that.
Yeah.
So if you're in your 20s and you want to be a millionaire by 30, the sacrifice you're making is you can't go partying. Like, you literally don't have time for that, because, well, all the time that you spent building your business is time that you're not partying. So there's an opportunity cost to everything. And in Musashi's case, it's not being with the woman of his dreams, which is Otsu. Otsu is this woman who is basically just on her knees, like saying, I will give my life to you.
Yeah.
I will sacrifice myself to you. I will be a great wife, mother. She's basically promising the dream to him, the dream in, ancient Japan. But he cares so much more about being a martial artist,
mm-hmm,
that he makes the painful sacrifice of turning her down.
Yes.
Now think about it. This is a guy who's in his early 20s. He's probably horny as fuck.
He mentioned that as well.
And here's this beautiful woman who's basically promising herself to him, and he's turning her down because he's like, there's more important things to me right now.
Yeah.
So in Musashi's case, that's the sacrifice he makes.
Yes.
Because there's not many other things to do in Japan other than, I guess, being a farmer or getting married or being a swordsman.
Yeah, it says yeah.
But so many people today, they don't. I mean, if you read, for example, Robert Greene's Mastery, basically the message of that book is, if you want to be a master, it's something you have to spend 10,000 hours or whatever it is practicing your craft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very obvious. But what's not as obvious is all the things that you don't get to do. All the things that you can't, all the opportunity costs that you're giving up.
Yeah, it's beautifully phrased.
To pursue the beautiful, to pursue whatever it is, whatever your calling is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a couple of quotes here, bro, that I think is like really important. Oh, this is funny. This is a very basic quote. How can I embark on my quest for truth and knowledge with a woman, with anyone interfering all the time? How can a man master the way of the samurai with a woman tagging along? Wouldn't that be funny? People would say, look at Musashi. He needs a wet nurse to take care of him.
He didn't want to be like a beta. Like, the guy's gonna laugh at me.
Yeah. And the last one, this is the most powerful one. I have a new name, Miyamoto Musashi.
Yeah.
I want to dedicate myself to training and discipline. I want to spend every moment of every day working to improve myself. I know now how far I have to go. If you choose to bind your life to mine, you'd never be happy. There will be nothing but hardship, and it won't get easier as it goes along. It'll get more and more difficult.
Yeah, beautiful as fuck.
Fucking incredible.
Yeah. When you said, that's the thing about Musashi. When you quote him on the Twitter timeline, he's such a archetype dipped in the collective unconsciousness pool that Jung talks about. It's just full of truths, you know. If you talk about it, it's so striking. It strikes you to the bone, you know.
Yeah, I think Musashi, if he had a Twitter account, it would be like Naval level Twitter account because he's so like raw.
Yeah, the ball level. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So yeah, definitely something like that. Yeah.
Cool, man. All right, so moving on. Let's get to book 2 because
Yeah, for sure.
I think we're pretty. So let's see, book.
Yeah.
2.
I think like a little TLDR then for the audience. Like,
Yep.
book 1, he was a savage. He gets in all these fights and a lot of the troubles, and he disregards his feelings for this woman who is madly in love with him. He gets trapped for 3 years in this castle where he gets to self-educate himself. Once he's free, he gets this conversation with Takuan again. There's this monk who had this pivotal moment in capturing him, but also showing him that his life is actually worth more than just being a fucking savage. And afterwards, he creates a new life. Before he was Shinmen Takezo, and he rewrites the kanji, these are the symbols, differently, and he becomes Miyamoto Musashi. And that is basically, Miyamoto is the village or the place where he comes from, and Musashi is the different reading of his name. And then he embarks on this journey to become the greatest swordsman that has ever lived. Then we go into book 2, Water.
Yeah, book 2 is when shit starts to heat up. When you're like, yeah, okay, the mission begins.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
He becomes Musashi, right?
Yeah.
I remember starting book 2 and going, yes, here we go.
Yeah, that's true.
So he comes across. This is a very interesting institute that we come across, the Yoshioka School.
Yeah, man, the fucking
So
Yoshioka School.
back in ancient Japan, and I'm sorry if my history is not very good. There used to be like separate like factions of schools, just like how these days I guess there are different types of like jujitsu schools.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the most prominent ones around this time is called the Yoshioka School.
Yeah.
And the head of the house of Yoshioka is a guy called Yoshioka Seijuro.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
At the Yoshioka School in
Spear
Kyoto,
School, right?
Yeah. At the Yoshioka School in Kyoto, Musashi challenges Seijuro, who's the leader of the school, to a duel. But he's not there for some reason.
Yeah.
And Musashi ends up defeating 3 of the most senior students of the school.
Yes.
And basically embarrasses them.
Yeah.
And then when Seijuro comes back, the other students try to ambush Musashi, but he somehow manages to escape.
Yes.
And around this time, Matahachi, who's the friend who we mentioned in book 1, he comes back into the story because he still thinks of Musashi as his old name, which is Takezo. But after hearing all the rumors of the people in the village talking about this great swordsman, he realizes very quickly that Musashi is actually his friend Takezo.
Yeah.
And he decides to follow Musashi's lead. At least he says so. And he swears to change his lazy way of life and become a swordsman too.
Can I chime in a little bit here, Eddie? Something that I want to touch about. Definitely in these things of self-improving and striving and being a fucking bum is also the big theme of regret. What you're definitely seeing is that while Musashi is in a perpetual state of, how do I say this? He's doubting himself. So you hear his thoughts that he's saying, what did I do with my 20 years of life? 21 years of life. And it really resonated with me as a younger man, even to this day. You know, I'm contemplating, what did I do this week, this day, this month, you know, this year, 220, you know? But while he actually keeps going on his path, not knowing if his path will resolve into what he actually wants or desires, Matahachi is this normie, this basic bitch, this NPC, this simp that just gives up. And if you give up, you just die in the brothel, fucking boozing and just on weed and porn and video games. And Matahachi is the perfect scapegoat to portray the 2020 boomer, zoomer. I don't know what the fuck you are right now. I'm not one of those people, but you're a fucking loser then. And it's like, it's just there that if you regret and go in this miasma, this fucking poison of your own faults, you drop to the fucking, you know, you drop, you know.
Yeah.
Just want to put it out.
So basically, the very simple, oversimplified way to look at it is that, you know, Musashi is the way of life, and Matahashi is what happens to you when you don't follow the way.
Yeah, it's when it's about being reactive versus active, you know, or proactive, you know, and not being
versus
active.
Reactive.
Yeah, proactive being versus reactive. Yeah, it's just one of these quotes. For example, I wrote it's such these Zen quotes. Like Musashi said, "I want to lead an important life. I want to do it because I was born a human being." When I read this, I was like,
I have the same highlight. Yeah.
it was so jarring to me because I was like, the fuck? Did he just say he just wants to have an important life because he's a human being? So he sees this inherent trait that I touched upon earlier, that life is so precious. It's such a fucking jewel that he's like, I should make something of it. I should make something of it. He's constantly reaffirming these things to himself, almost like a mantra, you know?
Yes. Here's another great quote that just comes after that, Fury. For Musashi, the important thing from now on would be his sword and the society around him.
Yeah.
His swordsmanship as it related to existing as a human being. In a moment of insight, he was satisfied that he had found the link between the martial arts and his own visions of greatness.
Yeah.
That to me perfectly encapsulates the feeling of finding your calling.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because not everyone is fortunate enough to find their calling.
So I would have to say you have to have a skill set, in the sense that you have to be good at something, in my opinion. Or you have to choose something that you like to do, and then you have a feeling that you're going to get better at it, you know? For me, I say all the time that I'm not going to get a career in music because I just know I've spent so much time and it's not going that fast. While, for example, this podcasting or this content creation in the form of like writing and stuff like that goes a little bit easier for me. I don't like to call myself good at it because I'm not there yet, and I know guys that make a lot of money with writing compared to me, so I definitely have levels to go. But this satiating feeling, I call it satiating because it's not happiness. Because happiness is like a spike, a burst, like when you fuck or when you eat a candy, and it's just there and it's gone. But this satiating feeling that is more consistent is when you have something, a skill, an activity, a task, and you're putting in the time and energy into it. And what you get in return is some kind of validation for yourself only, that you're bettering yourself and the people around you. This is a form of service always. And this is here when you enlarge this and amplify this, then it becomes a calling. This is for me a little bit how I see my whole social media presence. I call it like almost like a service to the people, you know? I better myself, I resonate with people, I put out podcasts, I better myself, I read shit. It's a perpetual feedback loop. It will never stop, in my opinion, you know? So in that sense, it's a grand calling, you know?
Yeah, it's fucking hard to describe the feeling. It's almost like it's almost like magnetic, right? It's like when you find your calling, it's almost like something that was magnetic. It draws you towards it.
Yeah.
You can't help but do it.
Yes. You can't help but
Right?
do it.
You're just somehow you're irrationally drawn towards it.
Yeah.
Like for me, I always knew I was gonna be a writer because when I was a kid, like I just loved the written word. I don't know why. I've always loved stories.
Yeah.
And my first love was was 80s and 90s Hollywood movies and storybooks.
Yeah, you told me about
And I
that.
think, and I'm the same as you, man. I've never really been all that drawn to music, but I know people who are like really, really magnetized towards music.
Yeah.
In fact, one good way I feel to find this is seeing how people learn languages.
Ah, yeah. Okay, go on. I
So
like that.
when I was learning Spanish, I did a lot of reading because, like I said, I like the written word.
Okay.
But I met a ton of people who learned a lot through just listening to music. Like
Yeah.
they learned the whole, and I've met people who have learned English that way too,
Oh,
learning
that's
through
dope. Oh, I do
listening
that
to
as
music.
well. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So I think there's certain mediums and there's certain
hmm
crafts that we're drawn to. Like some people just really love drawing, for example,
hmm
and they become graphic designers because they're very, very visual thinkers.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so I would say if you're having trouble finding your calling, think about what kind of activities, experiences you were drawn to when you were a kid.
Yeah, for sure. Like, bro, what I want to touch upon this, like, people are gonna laugh now, but so definitely an occupation is not hero, of course, but if you know Joseph Campbell or maybe Jordan Peterson or people who talk a lot about archetypes, is that as a young man, you definitely enter the hero's journey, and the hero's journey is
Mm-hmm.
always a cycle. And if you know Game of Thrones, it's a little bit Jon Snow's journey. If you watched all
Mm-hmm.
the seasons, no spoilers, but just watch that. It's something like that, and it's in that sense that it's always for me when I was younger, I want to be a Power Ranger, a Jedi Knight, uh, a fireman, like somebody who extinguishes the water, the fires,
Yeah.
something in this archetype of like a savior, a hero, something like that. So definitely nothing fits, of course, in like an occupation this. But then you start to think, okay, these are all stories, and definitely something that's between me and Eddie. We love to be storytellers. Apparently, we were looking at all these stories, all this cinema, all these books, and we were looking at it like almost in a form of addiction for me. Then, as like I really like this, and then if you see people telling stories, you want to be a storyteller, and that's what we're doing basically in in different mediums, different formats. This is the audio video type of format. But we're also having a blog, a mail list, a tweet, and that's then more the verbal type. And we're definitely like catering to our younger desires, in my opinion. That I just wanted to be some kind of like storyteller, storyteller cum hero combination actually for me then. And it's always something that was always there when you were younger, and you must have known it. And yeah.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think you really have to do a bit of introspection, right, and think about what you were drawn to, and that's really it.
Yeah, that's it.
And and I would argue, like back in the day,
hmm
I would say it's even harder these days because there's so many different options.
Yeah,
There's so many
what do
different
they call it? A choice
way.
overload. That's a
Yes,
that's a cool term they
exactly.
use because it's true.
I,
It's true.
I think that's actually one of the biggest problems with modern society. It's that
Yeah,
it's almost like there's too many options.
yeah,
When you're like I read a lot of like biographies and autobiographies, and
hmm
I'm always like, there's always a part of me that's a bit envious because I see these guys, I read these stories, and I'm like, well, your calling just came to you so obviously.
yeah,
One of the things that Jocko talks about, he's
hmm
always really grateful for, was that
Which one?
discovering that his calling was to be a soldier from like when he was like 18.
Yeah, fucking young. Yeah, he always thought he wanted to be a trooper and shit like that. And the second he got into the military, in the military, there's a plan laid out for you. Actually, you just have to get points and grades, and you get further. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were lucky in the sense that there wasn't that many options. It was either do this or do that, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of the younger people nowadays, I mean, there's, you know, first of all, if you're going to go to college, like there's just so many different things you can study. If you're going to go to online business, there's so many different, you know, different.
There's so fucking much out there, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, do you want to be an influencer? Do you want to start online like, there's just so many different things you can do. And what's even more confusing is that beyond just like your social media influencers, there's so many different people that people look up to these days. Like they listen, you know, they've got their parents, they've got their teachers, they've got their mentors, they've got their social media influencers, they got celebrities. It's like, who do you listen to? You know, whereas back in the day, I think you would just, for lack of a better word, you would just kind of like speak to God, or you listen to your instinct, and you would just know deep down what you were meant to do.
Definitely. Then chiming in there, a good tip is then to zone out, or what I call tune out, or go into the silence then. And what I mean by that is what we talk about fasting, but more like a digital fast. Minimalize all the usage of all your technology. What me and Eddie, I think Eddie does it as well, for me as well. I sometimes like unplug. I don't go on my Twitter account, on my other social media things. For me, like the Twitter thing is more obligatory because we do this content creating thing, then you're attached to it. You know, you make a little bit money of it, you have influence there, blah, blah. But it's so addictive then, you know? But what happens when you tune out of all these things? Literally, no technology, no phone, no computer. Then you just sit there and you get a little bit bored or something, but then your inner voice starts to speak to you from the silence. At least that happened. Then I take like a journal with me. I have like fuck tons of journal everywhere. I just sit down and it's like, okay, Fury, you need to work more on your storytelling, more on your mail list, or something comes in and I'm fucking up, or maybe Fury, you're drinking a little bit too much. Why are you doing that? And then you go into this self-medicating self-therapy that you're, how do you say, ignoring yourself because you're pumping yourself full of stimuli from all these gadgets and fucking garbage, you know?
Yeah, I experienced it myself when I spent too much time, for example, on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I have such a, like the people I follow, like I follow a wide variety of people. And so
yeah, I saw that.
When you go through your timeline, it's like, it's overwhelming, like just what the amount of ideas that you're going to get. And your natural inclination is going to be, well, I want to do everything.
Yeah.
But you can't do everything, obviously. And so your head kind of goes to a frenzy, and it's like this. It creates like anxiety and stress because you're thinking, oh, I want to do this, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, but I don't want to sacrifice that to do that, and then you see, oh, this guy's doing better than I am, and you start comparing yourself to him, and sometimes you just like fucking cut the noise out, man.
Yeah. So you want to go back to the main story in
yes
of book 2, the water? Where were you?
So basically we were at, so he escapes that ambush in the Yoshioka school, and he basically just goes wandering and gets in a bunch of fights, man. That's the general gist of it.
Yeah, for sure. Because he seeks him out, you know. It's not that he gets into these scuffles by accident. He wants to duel and wants to become the fucking best, you know.
Yeah. Do you remember the monks, Fury? Do you remember that part? He fights these monks.
Go on a little bit. Can you enlighten me a little bit?
Let's see. Group of Musashi goes to Hanya Plain, where he expects to fight a group of lance-wielding monks from the Hozoin Temple.
Yeah.
Ronin, who instigated the monks against him.
Wait, actually, like before we go into that, Eddie, like we'll get to that one second. I want to. I think we talked about this in our previous call. Like Musashi, what is it? He
Mhm.
kills a monk of the Yoshioka school, and then this priest comes to him, who is called Nikan, who teaches Musashi that he has too much murderous spirit. You know, I talked about this in our last call. I want to touch
Yeah, yeah,
upon that.
yeah.
It's so important for Musashi's character that so TLDR, Musashi kills this like yeah, lance wielding dude, but that is not the big student, not the big chief, you know. And but he kills this dude with the white with the wooden sword, and this priest sees that and he says, "Yo, Musashi, want to have a chat with me?" And what follows then is actually pretty interesting. So Musashi says, Musashi hears from this priest that the priest says, "Your strength is your problem. You must learn to control it, become weaker." And Musashi is
Yes.
obviously flabbergasted. And if you're a little bit more, yeah, inclined to think in basic terms, you're thinking more power, more strength, better, you know, a little bit more
Yep.
savage shit. And then Musashi goes on and he says, like, when I saw you earlier in the fields, I think I saw you. I felt something murderous in that look, as though you were searching for my weak spot. Then Nikan, the priest who found him, he said, it was actually the other way around. I perceived what you call something murderous in the air. That's how strongly your fighting spirit and ambition manifest themselves in every step you take. True,
Mhm.
you sense belligerence in me, but it was only a reflection of your own. And that, how do I say? So I just want to give a personal anecdote from me is that I'm not saying that I'm more alert than the average human, but I've gone through some stuff and gone through some murky places on the planet that when I'm walking somewhere, I'm always really vigilant. So I'm always looking around and I have this serious look in my eye that, let's say I'm like Musashi, I have this keen spirit that when I think that somebody wants something from me, it's actually maybe I'm projecting my own shit on top of this person actually what Priest
Mm.
is saying to Musashi, like, bro, you just constantly think about fighting and ambition and competition and perfection. It's obvious then that you see this in another human being, you know? It might not be the case. It might not be. But this was really eye opening for me when I reread it. So I reread my notes and I just wanted to share that. It happens with me all the fucking time. I think somebody wants like a quarrel with me, you know, especially at nighttime. But it's just
Mm.
maybe me projecting. And I just related heavily with that, that sometimes you have to keep your strongness in check, you know? And Musashi had to learn that because he was too much of a fucking savage, you know?
Yeah. He had to sort of tame himself.
Yeah. And so powering on with that, so Musashi felt immature in Nikon's presence. And
Mhm.
so this is interesting. So he won outwardly against the student with the lance, he killed him. But he lost inwardly against the priest. That was really fascinating. He had this like mini
Yeah. Yep.
duel with this priest who had like an overpowering presence. And men
Yep.
like that dwelt in his mind like living spirits, and Musashi thought constantly of how one day he might be able to overshadow them. And this resonated with me very hard because these days I see, yeah, these fucking successful guys, and when I talk with them, they're like these fucking hotshots. I feel it as well. They're not Zen. I feel that too as well. I know when I meet like a Zen person, that's very different, different energy. But I definitely felt that. So when you're on this journey, you always meet like these crazy cats, you know.
Yep. Um. Yeah. It says. I'm just reading the summary again, man.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a very interesting point. He says Musashi meets Nikan, like who's the priest you just mentioned,
Yeah.
the abbot of the Ozoin temple,
Yes.
whom he can hardly stare in the eyes.
Yes.
So he can't even look this guy in the eyes, even
Yeah.
though he's like this badass warrior. He
Yes.
can't even look this priest in the eyes, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so from there he goes to this area called the Hanya Plain,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
where he's supposed to fight these monks.
Yes.
And a group of Ronin who instigate the monks against him. After Musashi kills many of the Ronin, the monks kill the rest of them, and soon Musashi realizes that this was Nikan's idea of cleaning the streets of Nara of the unruly Ronin. Crazy. He gets in a bunch of fights in book 2, man. Like a bunch of them.
I want to tie in here, like, this is a big important note that I make. I cannot overstress this, that I put this in caps in my note. It's a trance. It's the first time it gets mentioned, and I mentioned earlier in this podcast, if you know this, it's almost the only reason for me why I like this book. Because I cannot overstate this. When you're in a trance, you're doing task X. It could be any calling that we've talked about. It could be web design, copywriting, fighting, kickboxing, boxing, MMA. It could be stock trading options, anything that you can imagine. But if you put yourself in a trance, past, present, and future disappears. You enter a flow state. You have perpetual, limitless energy. You attack the fucking task like nothing in the world exists. You never get hungry, never get thirsty. You even forget you have to go to the fucking bathroom. You immerse in the present moment. You fucking attack the task at hand. And there's always a fucking good result from it. And this is why Musashi always wins. This is the key why he always wins. The second something happens and he sees 4 to 5 guys trying to find him, he goes into like a berserker mode, like a trance state, like a fucking ballistic animal. And where at the same time he knows what to do. He can either run away, fight, parry, whatever, all the techniques that he knows. And he, one, does not care about his life, past or present, future. It does not exist anymore. If he dies or lives, he even says that. He's not concerned about death anymore. He's not concerned about... he doesn't even know that he's going to win. That's beautiful. It comes a little bit later. I think it comes later than the Hanya plane, yes. When he fights against those other dudes. But he says, I can quote it now actually, like, let me see if I can find it. I don't know if I can find it. No, I didn't quote it, but it was just, he was not clear. Oh yeah. He felt himself at no great disadvantage. He had no thought of death. He felt no certainty of his ability to win. And I put in caps, it was not in the book, that he has no mind. And this is what we call in the Japanese culture of Zen Buddhism, Mushin. Mushin means no mind. And if you see me tweet about it a lot, it comes from here actually. And some guys tweet about it a lot. And Mushin, no mind, means your mind is fucking empty. And what I mean by that is there's nothing in there. It's empty. And you're thinking, why do you want this? When you're fucking empty, you always win. Trust me. Something comes, you see it. You parry the sword. You kill this dude. You make fucking money. You get the girl. Whatever. When you're empty, you win. I cannot overstress this. If there's something out of this podcast that you want to take away from me, is that get in the fucking trance state, become fucking empty, and then you can always win. Just remember that.
When you say trance, you're referring to what a lot of other people call flow, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's what I like.
Flow.
Because flow is, how do you say, in peak psychology and peak performance psychology, in sports psychology, they call it when you lose track of time, and you have a skill that you're good at and it's challenging enough while at the same time it's not challenging, That's what But definitely they didn't know about flow back in the Edo period. I just wanted to
one quote here I think is I've got highlighted that I think is relevant to what we were talking about a few minutes ago about when you're overwhelmed with so many options and you start doubting yourself and you were talking about unplugging, right?
Yeah.
Unplugging from the internet, getting off Twitter, etc., and spending time by yourself. So it says here, when self-doubt threatened to overwhelm him, it was Musashi's habit to make straight for the mountains, in whose seclusion he could live to himself.
Oh, dope. I didn't catch that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know which section of the book that comes from, but I thought that was a really powerful lesson.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why we experience anxiety, one of the reasons why is because we get self-doubt. And the reason we get self-doubt is because we're just overstimulated. And rather than like stepping back and going to the mountains and taking the time to listen to our voice, you can call it God, you can call it instinct, whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than just being patient and waiting for the universe to give us the answer, our instinct in the modern environment is to go Googling, right? And to go watching more YouTube and consuming more content, hoping that we're going to find the perfect video or the perfect article that tells us, hey, Fury, you're feeling this anxiety. This is exactly what you need to do. This is step one. Like, that's what everyone's looking for, right?
You just told it so perfectly how everybody feels.
Yeah, and I know I told it perfectly because I've been there. Like I know what it's like.
Yeah, it's beautiful that moment.
And what's funny is, and we've all had this moment where we talk ourselves or we consume ourselves into this state of anxiety where we literally just go a little crazy. And then we just go for a walk or whatever, and then the answer just appears out of nowhere.
Yeah. Sure.
And it appears so clearly while we're walking, while we're meditating, while we're taking a shower, whatever.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, you just have to trust. You just have to trust and listen to your instinct. That's one of the biggest lessons I got out of this book.
Yeah, he's definitely a nature kind of guy. Very spiritual, you know. He lets it come to himself, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. He has doubts.
For sure, yeah.
You know, he runs into a lot of like confusing situations.
Yeah, because remember, Eddie, like he can get the woman of his dreams any second. He can just stop and like get her and have children, and it's done. He can live off the fat of the land.
Yeah, he turns her down like so many times.
Yeah, and they're like these pivotal moments. Yeah,
and these pivotal moments where he's so tempted.
Yeah.
I can't remember this one time. I think they're like, I can't remember the exact part of the book, but there's like a part where he's with her. I think like they're hugging or something like that.
Yeah, that's the like, midsection of the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way the author described the feeling, it made me think of like my teenage years, like the first time like I had a girlfriend and the feeling I had like underneath my skin, like the tingling sensation of feeling that feminine energy.
Yeah, I know.
You know, when you're full of testosterone, you just want to fucking ravish this chick, and for him to be able to turn her down because he cares so much about being this ultimate warrior is just like you're like.
It's crazy.
Talks about this on the podcast where you're just like, yeah.
the ultimate dude, like, yeah. Turn him down, like, yeah.
Yeah, because you know, every guy knows what it's like to
how do you say, like, this is gonna maybe like make some people angry, but then Musashi is the first MGTOW, you know. He's the first this is gonna make people angry, but he definitely went his own way. You know? Yeah,
he's a MGTOW, but he does it in an honorable way.
Yeah.
I mean, he has it's slightly different though. The MGTOWs like they're weak.
Yeah. I know.
Musashi's not afraid of not being able to handle the woman.
Yeah.
He's actually saying, no, I can handle that.
Yeah.
But there's more important shit to deal with. So
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good nuance.
MGTOWs are just cowards, man, because they can't. You know, rather than learning how to improve their relationships with women, they decide to just give up.
Yeah.
Whereas Musashi's like saying, no, I want this woman. I'm making this sacrifice because there's something more important.
So, to power on a little bit, what's interesting is that we were talking about how Musashi retreats to nature and to restore himself, so to say. And there's a cool quote that I put on my Twitter. Is in the place where hero is born, the mountains and rivers are fresh and clear. This hints at a place that's called the Yagyu Valley, And this is an introduction to the Koyagyu fief and the warriors that live there. I really want to like introduce these people, and one of them is called Seiki Shusai. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it right, but Musashi wants to fight him. He lives in the castle, who's the old man who started the Yagyu style. And the Yagyu style is interesting for me because, yeah, so you have this dude, this chief, he's called something Yagyu, blah, blah, blah. And he has a son called Yagyu Muninori, who is a rival of Musashi. And what's funny, he actually never duels with Musashi because he's out of town. And I think in the whole book, they never get to fight. It's almost like by design, it's created like that. And maybe it happened like that in real life as well. But why I mention it is because in my copy of the Book of Five Rings, this is for the fans. I will put this in the bio. This Book of the Five Rings actually comes with another book. And this book is called, it has a different kind of name. The Book of Family Traditions on the Art of War by Yagyu Muninori. So this is for the Japan lovers who want to learn more about Zen and samurai code and also the art of war. This book exists out there as well. I'm just going to put it in a link, but it's really fascinating that there was this rivaling samurai dude who wrote a book as well that can be read. And actually Takuan, the monk that we talked about, favored this samurai over Musashi. That's also pretty cool. And Takuan also wrote a book. It's called The Unfettered Mind. I haven't read that one yet, but I'm going to put it in.
I didn't know about that one, man. That's cool.
And he wrote it for Yagyu Muninori and not Musashi. That's really like interesting that, I don't know, like some kind of rivalry, you know? Like Gary and Ash for the Pokemon lovers there.
Yeah.
Just like extra details, you know?
All right, should we press on with the story?
Sure, yeah, go on.
Okay, so after that little battle with like all the rodents, at some point he comes across this young kid called Jotaro.
Yes.
Jotaro?
Yeah, Jotaro. Yeah.
Jotaro eventually, basically, he's like an apprentice, right? Would you say he's like a student? He wants Musashi to mentor him, and he basically follows him around for the rest of the story.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Okay, so I'm gonna read this little summary. Musashi and Jotaro arrive in Yagyu Valley, northeast of Nara, where they encounter a well-run fief and the legacy of Yagyu Muniyoshi Seiki. I'm gonna fuck this up. Seiki Shusai, who has retired in a mountain house behind Koyagyu Castle.
Yeah.
Back at the only inn in the village, Jotaro meets and becomes friends with Kocha, the young maid. Musashi takes his bath together with 3 other men from the city who complain that Yagyu has refused to duel with Denshi-chiro.
Yes.
Denshi-chiro is an important character. He's like the son or something like that of the Yoshioka house.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, Yoshioka. Yeah. No, sorry. He's Yoshioka Seiju's youngest brother. After his bath, he finds Kocha and Jotaro crying in his room. They have had a fight after Jotaro bragged about Musashi's prowess as a sword fighter, while Kocha maintained that Lord Yagyu was a much better fighter. Musashi decided that he must challenge Yagyu too. This is like a constant thing in Musashi's travel. He just travels from town to town, and as soon as someone says, "Oh, there's this legendary swordsman who they think is better than him," he's like, "All right, let's fight to the death."
But we cannot overstress this, Eddie. What he's actually doing, to put it in modern terms, you know how when we doing online stuff and we meet a challenge, you know what we do? At least for me, it's like E. We get like a little bit like E, you know, like we back off a little bit. But that, at least that's for me. But he's the reverse. He's like, okay, there's this badass dude. I'm gonna fight with him. I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's gonna get like be a fucking legend. It's pretty fucking logical. He would be, like you said, the ultimate entrepreneur. I swear. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Musaki's design. Yeah, nothing much happens after that. he eventually fights Denshi Shiro and defeats him. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Musashi goes.
Are we at the part of the peony,
castle.
the flower? You know, the flower that's cut with like the stem. Have any notes on that?
Yeah, that's the part where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
you want to take over from me? You want to talk about this?
Yeah.
You've got a lot of notes here.
So what's interesting, I touched upon these guys that Eddie was talking about as well. Seiki Shusai, or whatever his name is, and Yagyu Muniyoshi and Yagyu Muninoi. They had this style called the Yagyu style. So this guy, this Seiki Shusai, he's living in a castle, and he's an older dude. He has already won his stripes. He's basically done with battle. And this is from a later part, actually. He put worldly desire behind him, both his own and that of others. So it's like a monk. He put what I call life is like a chessboard. He put himself off the chessboard. He's not playing anymore. What's really interesting, this guy does have skills, and he arranges the flower with the same method he uses the sword. And it sounds cryptic at first, but then something happens. So there's this. What did you call that guy? The Danyushi, like the son of
Denshi Shiro, I think.
Yes, he
the
wants
brother of.
Yeah, he wants to challenge Seiki Shusai, but Seiki Shusai is he's qualifying leads. Like if we were gonna like business terms, like what he's doing. What this motherfucker?
He is.
He doesn't meet the person face to face. He doesn't give a fuck. He just sends a flower to this dude, and the flower actually has a cryptic message inside it. It's really dope, actually.
It's the way he cuts it, right?
Yeah, and what's funny, this Denshi dude, this was the spear dude. He's from the spear school, the Yoshioka school. He doesn't see it. He doesn't understand it, and he just, I don't know. He gives the flower away to one of these kids or something, one of these girls that's around. But Musashi's also there, and he just gets the flower by accident, and he sees how the stem is cut, and by like cutting through the stem on the other side, he looks at the cut and thinks, fuck, this guy can cut a stem better than me, so logically this guy must be a fucking master. I want to fight him and kill him.
Yes,
the same the same instinct that he has, you know. This guy's good. I want to do it. I want to fucking kill him, you know? And that's how Musashi wants to storm the castle. And that's how he gets into a big, massive fight then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a good quote from a good highlight that I got from the Peony.
Yeah. But that was just really dope how Musashi saw from the stem. So a little bit, I can chime in here for the fans out there. There's like a quote that gets used so much from Musashi is that if you know the way in one thing, you will see the way in everything. And definitely throughout book 1 and 2, you can already see that Musashi has what he calls the eye of perception, just through the stem that is cut by this samurai master patriarch of martial arts, the Seiki Shusai, the leader of the Yagyu style. He sees that this guy is a samurai master. So this is the quote in application. Like, if you see the way in, if you know the way in one thing, you see it in everything. Musashi is just so constantly aware of everything in his present moment in the universe. Everything is his teacher without being too spiritual. And then he knows this is a guy I have to motherfucking murder, you know?
I got a great highlight here, Fury, that encapsulates Musashi's attitude.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, when you sense something, you sense it, he said. There's really no way to explain it. If you want me to demonstrate what I mean, you'll have to unsheath your sword and face me in a match. There's no other way.
Yeah, that scene is actually pretty dope. I highlighted it actually, Eddie, but I didn't put it in my notes. I remember it because I reread the story. It was typical Musashi because it's definitely an interaction of one-upmanship. So what happens?
Yeah.
These students of so what happens? So you have Seiki Shusai. He never comes out of his fucking castle for anybody except Otsu.
Yes.
By accident got there as like a little maiden who take care of the flowers, blah blah. But so then he has another dude called Shoda. It's not that important, but Shoda was training these lower students, and these guys picked up Musashi. It's not important who the fuck these guys are because they're nobodies in the story of Musashi. But they picked him up and they were interrogating him as if they were cooler than Musashi. And it's definitely a one-upmanship, you know? And they were like, yo, bro, can you fight, basically? And he was like, and they were interrogating about the peony, you know? Like, how did you know about
Yes.
And he doesn't like that. He doesn't like small talk. I don't know if I quoted it in one of these two books or later. He's like, why do people small talk? What the fuck is that about? You know? He just wants to like fight. I love that about it. He must have been a cool dude. I swear. Like if you just
Dude, if Musashi was on Twitter and some influencer challenged him, he would be like, "Name the place, bring your sword."
Set location. Set location.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, he goes on here. He was not talking about a fencing match to be decided by technical skill only. He meant total war, where the combatants concentrate every ounce of their spirit and ability, and their fates are decided.
Yeah.
That's Musashi's elegant way of saying it's death or nothing.
Yeah. That's dope.
Incredible.
I love that about him.
So what happens to the peony?
I actually forget what happens with the flower. I think it just gets into like a flower vase or something, but it's more that Musashi gets drawn to the castle. That's what happens, right?
That's right. Yeah. He ends up going to the castle and killing a bunch of them.
Yeah, and then we end up at the part of the Nightingales already, which is the last chapter of book 2. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What do you got?
So I can just spoil the how do you say the summary of it is that on the gate of the house of Seiki Shusai, it says that no swordsman will you find here, only the young nightingales in the field. And Musashi realizes what I already said, that through the Yagyu style, Seiki Shusai, the leader that he wanted to challenge, this patriarch, he had put his worldly desire behind him. And in this garden, you will only find flowers and birds, the wind and the moon, and only this you must be if you want to enter this gate. And Musashi then realized, how could one then gain honor and distinction from defeating a man who has left honor and distinction behind? It's meaningless. So if you kill a monk, basically, it's like, yeah, bro, I don't give a fuck anymore. Something like that. And he's like, he doesn't give a fuck anymore. That was a really cool moment. I don't know. Always like something paradoxal happens in Musashi's stories, you know? It's not just all killing and blood, actually. So that was dope. A twist.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about the book in general, in that on paper, this is a very violent book, but it's not about that at all.
Yeah.
Like even the written, none of it is written in a way that's like savage. No, you know, it's not like Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian is just like pure gore.
Blood Meridian, babies get smashed on fucking rocks.
Yeah, it's like it's fucking like it'll give you nightmares. You know what I mean? Whereas I don't know, Musashi kind of makes like the art of fighting. You know, he can't. It's like an art to him. It's an art form.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so Nightingales. What happens here? He reads the message post gay. Just then he hears Otsu sees Musashi hiding behind a tree, and he follows him when he runs away.
Oh, by the way, bro, yeah, this is where he meets Otsu again. If you want to touch upon that a little.
That's right. He runs into Otsu again.
Beautiful Otsu. Flute. Can you imagine having this lovely art woman who plays the flute. She wants to have your children. She follows you to the fucking ends of Earth, and you keep shooting her down.
Yeah.
Jocko is like,
I feel
"No!"
the whole time I feel so bad for her because she's such a
Yeah.
nice girl.
Musashi
And,
took the ultimate red pill, bro.
yeah. Yeah, man. But there is one time, like we talked about a few minutes ago, where
Yeah, he meets her on the bridge or something.
where he meets her, like, yeah, and he's so close, like he's so close to her, but he just somehow finds the courage to turn her down.
Mission always first.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It was definitely, yeah.
I'm trying to find another quote here, but I think that's from book 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't take too many highlights. I think I told this to you on the private call, but what was I going to say? At the very beginning, when I was reading this book, I was highlighting a lot.
Yeah.
But then after book 2, I just realized I'm just gonna like ride the story.
Because no, but it's actually a perfect moment, Eddie. Because book 3, to tease the viewers a little bit, is where Sasaki Kojiro comes, who's the ultimate nemesis of Musashi, who gets beefed up throughout the whole book as well, until the ultimate final duel, until late at the end of the book. You know, so it's definitely dope.
Yeah, and he reappears again like throughout the entire book, right?
Yeah, yeah. He's like the ultimate rival. It's really dope. Yeah. But that comes in like book 3, book Fire, and we've been talking almost for 2 hours now or something. It's a perfect, how do you say, like a duration for the viewers. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fuck. Well,
yeah.
Should we pause it here and then like?
Yeah.
We'll do part. We'll try see if we do a part 2 and 3. We'll see how the people receive this one.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely have any closing thoughts? Quick one. Yeah, quick one. Like closing thoughts about this whole podcast in general, not per se book 2 and 3, but your feeling about this in general going into this, and just anything.
I think the main lesson to take away is, calculate. I like this quote from Scott Adams. If you want success, calculate the cost, or figure out the cost and pay it. And that's really what Musashi does. Like, when he decides, when he comes out of that prison, reading after having studied and read for 3 years in a row,
man,
and deciding that he's going to dedicate his entire life to being a master swordsman, master samurai, even though he doesn't explicitly say it, he knows what he's giving up, right? He's calculated the cost. He knows that he's not going to have a stable life. He knows that he's not going to be able to be with Otsu.
Yeah.
He knows he's not going to be able to go home and just be a farmer in his home village.
Yeah.
And he knows that if necessary, he's going to die an early death.
Yeah.
In fact, he says this explicitly a couple of times throughout the book, where it's like, I understand that I could probably die, and that's cool.
Yeah. So for me, I just definitely want to add on that it's not too late, because I was talking about regret, and I could tell my younger self was feeling the FOMO of Matahachi a little bit, and feeling the FOMO of Musashi as well. This guy that spent 3 years in jail, if you're listening to this, there's a chance you haven't been in jail. You didn't lose that much time. You can always start again. And it's not too late. You're probably young when you're listening to this. You have a nice Wi-Fi internet connection shit. Just buckle down and do what Eddie said. So
yeah. So yeah, my main takeaway, my final message is just to understand what you're sacrificing, but also understand the significance of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it's not significant enough, maybe it's not something that you really desire.
Oh yeah, that's
okay. I'm not saying you're gonna fail, but maybe there's something more worthy.
That's a dope one. You're not even reaching for the stars that you want, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's pretty dope, actually. Yeah, so we'll end it with that. Gonna stop the recording now. So thanks everyone for tuning in. what do they say? Like and subscribe. This is the fucking HOOA podcast with Eddie. We'll see how this gets received, and we'll see if there's a continuation. And thanks for listening again. Thank you very much for everything, your support. HOOA.
Out.